Hi, I'm Rochelle, and you're watching or listening to Box F1 Pod. Welcome back to the 2024 F1 season. We kicked off with things in Bahrain on a Saturday, which was crazy. The race, not so crazy. There were still some fun things that happened on track. There's still things to discuss about what to expect for the coming year for teams that aren't Red Bull, and of course there was a lot of off-track happenings that we're going to talk about as well. While I chat about the Bahrain GP, I will be cooking again, but instead of doing a Bahrain recipe, I decided to do Carlos's epic pancake recipe. In theory, epic. Haven't tried it yet. To celebrate his third place finish, and also because we're in Saudi Arabia next week, so I thought I'd make an Arabic inspired recipe next week, and today we can celebrate Carlos and make these pancakes. I do have to preface things with the fact that Carlos gives recipes in the same way an immigrant mother gives recipes, aka there are no measurements or anything, which is fine when it's like a cooking recipe, but pancakes is very close to baking, and that stresses me out. So hopefully they turn out fine. Anyway, without further ado, let's kick off with the first digital warm-up of 2024. All right, lap one, F1 news. So the first thing that I want to know about before we get started is that there's one rule change that will make a difference, I think. And that is that DRS is now going to be enabled after lap one instead of 2 laps in, which is how it's been for the last however many years. That will probably change things a lot considering it's very close to the start and things are usually chaotic after lap one. I almost forgot what I was doing. So we'll see if that makes any difference at all. Okay, so the next thing I want to talk about is Charlotte Tilbury is sponsoring one of the F1 Academy cars. The livery is sick. The whole car is like black and covered in like different shades of red, lips holding like lipstick between their teeth like a cigarette. Looks so cool. I love that there's like this girly element coming into F1. I think it's necessary and I think it's important. I think being curly and driving a race car is like the coolest thing you can do. Also, it's so not Danica Patrick's, which makes me happy. All right, so moving on. The investigation into Christian Horner basically concluded he was found not guilty and cleared of all charges. Some believe that Red Bull and Christian paid off the person who accused him with a lot of money, like $500,000. I'm not sure that that's been confirmed as a fact, but anyways, after that verdict came out, everyone thought things were over. The next day, a Google Drive of all the evidence was emailed, not on like a BCC, but like so everyone could see who got it, to like all of the F1 journalists, F1 bosses, team principals, etc. Basically based on the messages in this Google Drive, because it was like very vague what he was accused of for a while. Like first it was like just he was an angry man, then it was like sexual misconduct. There was a lot of things that were being speculated, but this alleged Google Drive shouldn't be believed. The Google Drive's not alleged, but the contents pertaining in it, whether they pertain to Christian, are alleged. But basically it's a bunch of screenshots of text messages between him and his PA. It seemed that they had a consensual relationship at one point, and then she, I guess, changed her mind, or the relationship ended, but he continued persisting, like, trying to get her to send him pictures, trying to get her to meet up with him, just being like highly inappropriate. It's all inappropriate to begin with a PA. To continue after she's asked him to stop multiple times makes it harassment. But again, this is all alleged. Okay, so again, this is all alleged. We don't know if it's true. It's certainly damning evidence if it is, but there's a lot of things that seem kind of off about it, if that makes sense. Like the spelling is terrible. There's no capitalization. The way they're texting doesn't sound like Christian Horner. But again, we've never texted Christian Horner, so we don't know if that's just his style of texting. Also, people have found weird timestamp inconsistencies, and basically, I don't think anyone's officially reported on them as being true, because I think a lot of these news outlets are trying to confirm or trying to find a way to verify that these are true. I think Jerry Horner would know whether that's how he texts. So once she saw them She probably immediately knew if it was true or not true. Whatever the case, Christian still has a job as of now, and they're like going about things like business as usual. The PR team, however, must be like stressing, probably working overtime. They are not having a good few weeks. So basically the Bahrain Grand Prix, Jerry Horner came and they walked through the paddock holding hands. She's wearing a white dress. I don't know if anyone's seen Anatomy of a Scandal. Not that what Christian's been accused of matches what that guy's been accused of, although it's in the similar area. But a lot of the tactics, like the white dress, the hand-in-hand walking, the like united front thing, is very reminiscent of that. But again, they would be doing this whether it's true or not true, because it's bad look nonetheless. And regardless of whether it's true or not true, it must be so hard for her to do this. Like, if it's not true, you're still being speculated and scrutinized and like looked at like through a magnifying glass. And if it is true, you have to do all this and know that your husband did this to you. And it's just poor Jerry Horner. Also, like, I think everyone saw the pictures of them walking hand in hand through the paddock, but I saw a video like behind all the cameras taking those pictures, and it looked terrifying. They're like walking, there's like a mop of cameras like following them along. And like, I would have cried. I don't know how she didn't cry. Like, that looked so stressful. Another thing that people are starting to chime in on, Zach and Toto Brown are demanding transparency and clarity from Red Bull and F1 about the investigation and what actually happened, yada, yada, yada. I mean, okay, guys. Of course it's them. Like, to no one's surprise, it's those two. I also would like to know the tea, but I don't know. They're the only principals that spoke out about it. But I'm pretty sure it's only because they hate Christian. Also, Jos Verstappen. So Jos Verstappen is known to not like Christian for like whatever reason. Perhaps it's because Christian has a better relationship with his son than Jos does. I don't know. But like, there's been rumors that he's been trying to get rid of Christian for a while. There are also rumors that this is part of it, which I didn't think was true. It did first originally get linked to a Dutch news outlet. Jos is Dutch, so that part adds up. But for him to like help orchestrate all this doesn't really make sense. However, he did say a quote this past weekend, and he said, "The team is in danger of being torn apart. It can't go on the way it is. It will explode. He is playing the victim when he's the one causing the problems." So, first of all, very rich coming from Jos and his own history with stuff like this. But also just, I don't know, it's all the Christian haters that are speaking out, which I don't think means anything either way. I don't know. It's all very confusing. I don't think this is the end of it. I think it's going to keep going on for a while. Also, the gossip mills are working in overtime. So moving on from the whole Christian saga, because that's all just a giant question mark at the moment. Another big question mark is who will fill the seat at Mercedes and where will Carlos go? There was a picture of Toto and Checo talking like in the dusk in the paddock in Bahrain alone, and that was circulated everywhere online. Everyone's like, "Oh, Checo to Mercedes." I think they were just having a chat, but it's fine. There was also a picture of Carlos Sr. at the Red Bull paddock at a table with Dr. Helmut Marko and Christian Horner having a chat, and everyone's like, "Oh, Carlos to Red Bull." I don't think Carlos to Red Bull is a good move, but I'm glad his father is trying to help him out. Also, I'm pretty sure he knows those guys because he used to race for Red Bull or whatever. And Carlos used to race for Red Bull. So it could have just been a friendly chat. But you know, rumor mills. If you don't cook a lot, one thing people don't tell you is that beating egg whites into a stiff peak or whatever takes for fucking ever. Okay, there it is. Beaten to full. Okay. Gently gonna put this to the side and rebeat just before I put it in so it's extra foamy. And I'm not gonna press any buttons. Okay, moving on. Lap 2, off-duty F1, my favorite lap. All right, so this is gonna be the online section, and it's just some random stuff that I saw that I just need to mention. All of it will be linked in the show notes. So Max posted a photo dump of him in Amsterdam before the season started and captioned it Amsterdam.jpg, and Lando commented with a bunch of question marks. And I lolled because if you're unaware, Lando has a side account for his photography called Lando.jpg. And I think he thinks he owns .jpg. On a podcast, I think it was Alex, where all this information stemmed from. I might be wrong, but I'm pretty sure it was Alex on a podcast when he said that all of the drivers had to do the infamous George Russell pose from the intro titles last year. And then they basically just decided to pick on George. But what's important in this piece of information is that somewhere out there is footage of all the drivers doing that ridiculous pose. And either they all looked cooler doing it or even stupider doing it. I just need to see all of it to know why it was George that was chosen. I mean, I have an idea why. But because it's George, and George is a walkable meme, and F1 knew. But I need to see the rest of I need to see the rest of them do it. Another thing that I think is important, in an interview, Oscar was asked about the driver's WhatsApp group, and he said, yes, there is in fact a WhatsApp group, but unfortunately for all of us, it is actually very business focused, and it's just about logistics and stuff like that, and there's no memes or funny jokes or, like sharing TikToks or stuff like that. He did say that people get removed once they leave the grid, instead of a new group chat being made. And he says that the admin does that. And there is a very big rumor floating around that it is George who's the admin. I don't know if we've just all made that up because it just seems like something George would do. But I love the idea of George just immediately deleting people from the WhatsApp group once they have been fired. Also, this is random, but George has said in an interview that the night before everyone found out about Lewis going to Ferrari, he had slept over at Toto's house. Don't know why. When he said, I slept over at Toto's house, I'm imagining them in the living room in sleeping bags, gossiping and watching Mean Girls or something. But he probably was just in the guest house or a guest room or something. But he was like, when I was leaving, Lewis came over for breakfast and we ran into each other and walked past each other. And later that day, Toto called me and was like, you will never believe what Lewis just told me. Wild. Another thing that came out is the F1 team released one of their first videos of the year, which was the driver. It was a Meet the Drivers thing, and they asked them a bunch of great questions actually this year. First question was where do they get their competitiveness from? Almost everyone said their competitiveness comes from their dad, except for Lewis, whose competitiveness apparently comes from abuse. Nicknames. Lando said his nickname is Bob, and it's just he's like, my friends just came up with that. It's super creative, and it's why he gets called in public. And I think I've seen rumors of that, him introducing himself to girls at clubs as Bob. Max has said that his dad has a lot of nicknames for him that he shouldn't be saying on camera, which that's concerning. But also, are we surprised? And also, what could he possibly be calling him that we can't surmise on our own? Checo said his nickname is Checo. It's wild. And Alex Albon's nickname is Albano, which no one ever knew where it came from. It just kind of seemed it just seemed natural, but apparently it comes from the fact that when he was younger, he had to have his blood type on his race suit. And it was O positive, so it was Albin and then an O next to it. And everyone just started calling him Albano from that. Interesting. So Pierre said he has absolutely no nicknames and has nothing to contribute to this conversation, which is funny because I think he realized that saying tripod was the biggest mistake of his entire life last time. The two best, they were also asked what their ideal day off looks like. And Charles's was oddly specific. He says he would play 2 hours of piano, then an hour and a half of paddle, then he would have lunch with his family, then he would have to nap after lunch because lunch makes him tired. And then if there's a car track near where they are, he will go to the car track with his brothers. And then he would have dinner with his friends and then follow that with a big party. That is a very specific day. Lance basically didn't answer the question. He just said he loves dinner. He said dinner is very important. I'm always thinking what I'm having for dinner. First thing when I wake up in the morning. That's the most exciting part of my day. Yeah, dinner is very good. I love dinner. I want dinner now. Get Lance on the pod. I need to know what he likes to have for dinner. Why did no one ask him that follow-up question? Also, what was really funny to me was that they asked him what their biggest fear was. And I forgot what Oscar said, but he was someone's going to say something super philosophical and everyone's going to be like, "Aw." And they immediately cut to Logan saying his biggest fear is not living up to his full potential. And I immediately went, "Oh." It was really sad. Charles said that his biggest fear is not being in control, which must make it terrifying being at Ferrari. They also asked what the most used emoji on their phone is, and that's an excellent question. George said his most used is a thumbs up, which is the most George thing you could possibly say. Charles is the upside down smiley face. That also checks out. Lance said it's a fist bump and the red heart for good energy. And Yuki said it's the drooling one, which is also accurate. So some about them being out and about. Not online. Max, Lando, Fernando, and Daniel played a game of paddle and it looked so wholesome. Lando posted a bunch of pictures and the last one was a group shot and then Penelope running up to Max. And they're all looking over at Penelope and it was very cute. The idea that Max is basically a girl dad and Daniel and Fernando, who are so old, are just looking on like, what's that like? I don't understand. Also, Sky F1 took the 2019 rookies, who are George, Lando, and Alex, karting, and it was very cute. They took a very wholesome picture together, and then in the dump, Lando posted a picture of them back in 2019 all together, and they've grown so much, and they're all so cute, and I loved it. Loved the little throwback. In an interview, Lewis said that he was asked if he's starting to learn some Italian, and he said he's gone this long not learning another language, and it just made me realize that no one in the paddock whose first language is English, I don't think any of them speak another language. Like in DTS, when except for Lance. Lance speaks French. But other than that, I don't think anyone speaks another language. I was reminded of this in DTS when the new Alpine F1 principal was appointed and he was meeting with the other team principals and he was discussing with his with his coworkers. He was like, who of them speaks French? Definitely not Christian. And he was right. I don't think Christian speaks French, but you could try. And in the same vein, when George and Lewis were doing one of those crowd, the fan things where they stand on a stage and answer questions. And one of the questions is, what's your favorite cheat meal? And George said pizza. And he's like, oh yeah, Charles is always talking about the great pizza. And he's like, oh, I guess Lewis will know all about it next year. And Lewis was like, oh, I can't wait for the pizza man. He knows there's cheese on it, right? This is my biggest unanswered question, is how Lewis plans to manage being vegan. There's a lot of amazing Italian dishes that are vegan, like tomato, basil, pasta, garlic and olio, all of those things. There's a lot of great dishes. Pizza is not one of those dishes. So what's the plan, bro? Another interview thing that happened was as George did his top 10 items that he must have with GQ. And we learned some interesting things about drivers in general, but also about George specifically. In terms of the suits, we learned that apparently they absorb about 1 kilo of sweat every single race. And also the suit is tailor-made to fit every single driver, but only when they're sitting down in the cockpit. So when they're standing, it always looks like they're kind of baggy in the butt. It's because they are. When they sit down, it's fit as a glove, snug as a glove. Anyway, also they travel so much that they each have 2 passports, and I think he's already almost filled one up completely. He also apparently says that sunglasses help adjust to different time zones, and that's why he's always wearing them. And it's not to be an asshole, it's because he's trying to adjust to a different time zone. And apparently has a big head, and finding good sunglasses is very challenging for him. He also travels with his own pillow, which he said he does, but I kind of feel like they all have to, because I personally hurt my neck the most in my sleep, and their neck is the most important thing. So if they have a bad pillow, they're fucked. And none of them have ever had that issue. Imagine having to skip a race because you've tweaked your neck in your sleep, and you're like, oh, I can't turn my neck because I slept. That would be tragic. But their neck is so important. So he said he also travels with a fitness band, and he does stretches on the plane with it. He's like, when I'm waiting for the bathroom and everyone's giving me these weird looks because I'm just stretching, and I'm a little confused because he travels private. So the only person who could be giving him a weird look is his fitness trainer and maybe Lando. So I don't know what he's talking about. Some fun facts we learned about George is that he likes Coldplay, Ed Sheeran, and Black Eyed Peas. Last year was the first year we all noticed George doing the whole 90s Hugh Grant type hair. And that was because that was the first year his hair was not cut by his mother. Big steps for baby George. George also claims that his one of his essentials when he travels is shaving cream and a razor because he has the most clean cut shave on the grid. He says literally check anyone. And if they're able to grow facial hair, which not many are, but if they are, mine is the smoothest shave. And I'm pretty sure it's because he's shaving nothing. I don't think he can grow hair. Anyway, lap 3, track-sided Bahrain. So first, I finally realized that I can watch the driver's parade live on YouTube. So some interesting observations that I made was that, first of all, they took a photo before they did the parade. And I'm just curious if they do this every time for every race or if it's just because it's the first race of the season that they did it. Also, interesting to note, Lewis fist bumped every single driver there, including Max. They're best friends, just kidding. Also, what everyone was obsessed with was the fact that after they left the photo to go to the parade and they were getting on the truck, Lewis and Charles sort of crossed paths and they started talking, and they talked like the entire parade. They like stood in the corner and talked to each other the entire time. And I am pretty sure Charles was indeed telling Lewis where it is he cries, Maranello. He also, it took me literally the whole race. I noticed this at the end of Saturday, but like Charles grew a bizarre goatee that like kind of makes him look like a much more attractive Chandler from Friends. He doesn't look bad with anything, but why? My question is just why? It's very cleanly cut, so it's clearly on purpose. Unlike Lando's, who's like scraggly everywhere because he can't actually grow facial hair. Sorry, Lando. They do interviews as they're on the parade. They each take turns to go there. And I think it's really cute that they ask them to say something. They ask them a bunch of questions and ask them to say something in their own language if they speak a different language. And they immediately launch like so hard into their own language. It's very nice. But I do want to point out that Lewis immediately thanked the whole team and everyone back at the factory. I don't think they believe him anymore. Like, I feel like they know how he feels and they know he doesn't mean it. It just doesn't hold as much weight anymore. Anyway, Brundle's grid walk was really funny. He started with saying this will actually be a grid stroll. Didn't make a Lawrence Stroll joke, but he should have. He had a new ankle fitted a few months before, earlier, and in London. And then he name dropped his surgeon. And then I zoned out and they zoomed in. And I thought they were zooming into the like ground. And I thought they were zooming in to show us his new ankle. But really he had started talking about the track and what it was made of. And I was like, why are they showing us his new ankle? Is this just an ad for his surgeon? There were a lot of like royal adjacent people there, not Kate Middleton. We still don't know where that woman is. The Duke of Richmond was there, and his name is Charles Gordon Lennox. I wonder if he watches Ted Lasso. I didn't know there was a Duke of Richmond, honestly. Also, Fergie was there, the royal one, not George's favorite singer, Fergie, of Black Eyed Peas fame. And Neymar and Patrice Evra were there, and Brundle was interviewing Patrice, and then Neymar came up and they started hugging, and Brundle was like, I'm gonna walk away. There's a lot of football loving going on there. Oh, Brundle. I also came up to this man called Dario Frank Kitty or something, and he announced him like he was like the biggest person to ever exist. And it turns out it was just one of his friends. The guy was like, you missed a bike trip. And Brundle was like, oh, I was getting a new ankle. And he's like, the other guy was like, that's why you look so refreshed. And then he was like, okay, bye. Just catching up with his friend. Jeremy Clarkson was there. He went on a long rant about how he was confused what everyone was doing all winter because no one has gotten any better. And then he ends his rant and Brundle goes, good stuff. And Jeremy goes, you didn't listen to a word I said, did you? And Brundle goes, no, not really. You lost me somewhere after the first sentence. And Jeremy goes, well, everyone at home who knows Formula One will know what I'm saying. And I thought it was funny. And then Jeremy Clarkson also very drunkenly waved the checkered flag at the end. It's quite amusing. Gunther was there, and he was there to report for his new job as pundit for a German news outlet. And I just would like to say that Gunther might be one of the most impressive people in terms of job turnaround. I've never seen someone get fired and immediately have a new job that fast. Also, something else to note is that the drivers were all running up to the anthem, and Brenda kept trying to catch people, and everyone was just spreading up. And then Max ran past him, like the last one. And Brundle was like, you good? And then Max was like, yeah, I'm good. And then he ran back and he's like, are you good? And Brundle was like, yeah, I'm good. And then as he was walking away, Brundle was like, he risked a fine, but it was so nice of him to ask me how I was doing. And he literally mentioned it like 3 times during the actual race. Like, does no one ask Brundle how he's doing? He was very moved by it. And that concludes our digital warm-up. On to the race rhyme. Welcome to the first race of the F1 season in 2024. I guess Bahrain was like, you got enough drama during the off-season, so no more. But before we recap a slightly boring Bahrain GP, let's sip on some winter silly season tea. Christian was under investigation for behaving poor. He was cleared of all charges, but is he guilty? We're not sure. Now Christian and Ginger Spice are doing damage control after someone released alleged text on a drive. Damn, I wonder if this is a drive Christian Horner will manage to survive. Lewis moved to Ferrari in a move that shocked the world, and Toto and George were like, how could you be so cold? Fred was like, oui, oui, mon ami, je m'appelle Fred Vasseur. Do my sick business moves stab you in the back? Bien sûr. So who knows what this means for Charles in 2025? And more importantly, will Carlos have something to drive? Which brings us to the Bahrain Grand Prix. It was boring in a way no one wanted to see. Max crossed the finish line 22 seconds before the rest, but I'm pretty sure everyone else's cars were possessed. Williams' steering wheel were steering themselves, while Charles kept locking up because I think his brakes were under some kind of spell. Valtteri took halftime in the pit lane for 52 seconds, while Yuki was activated by V-Carb's dumb suggestions. But the highlight of the day came from one hot chili, who overtook his teammate twice, like he was doing the gritty. Carlos has entered his DGAF era as he's faced with trying times, and I have a feeling that this year, all we'll see is Sainz, all we'll see is Carlos Sainz. So Max, Checo, and Carlos make up our Bahrain top 3. See you next week on the mean streets of Jeddah for the Saudi Arabian GP. Okay, on to analysis. While I fry this up, hopefully it's not too loud. So the one thing I want to note from quali was that Charles's Q2 final lap was the same time as Max's winning pole lap in Q3, but because Charles was forced to use soft tires in Q3, he was slower and therefore did not get pole. Yet another Ferrari fuck up that gets in Charles's way of succeeding. Tragic. So the starting grid is as follows. Max, Charles, George, Carlos, Checo, Fernando, Lando, Oscar, Lewis, Nika, Yuki, Lance, Alex Albon, Daniel Ricciardo, Kevin Magnussen, Valtteri Bottas, Guan Yu, Logan, Esteban, and Pierre. Yes, Esteban and Pierre are last. Okay, so we're going to start talking about the race by talking about the new intro titles. Just as a preface, the F1 titles are always going to be fun for me. They're never not going to be fun. There's just like the concept of them, it just creates a baseline that I will always enjoy, but you can be better and you can be worse. And this year was definitely worse. It felt super rushed. It felt super zoomed in. And I feel like I was looking up their noses half the time. Like none of those angles were conducive to any of their facial features, except for Charles, because every angle is conducive to his facial features. And like that translates to the podium ceremony videos that were playing behind them, where they make them like pretend like they've won so they can play it if they do win or get a podium. Those were all such weird angles. Checo looked deranged. Like, I don't know what the vision was for this year. I feel like these aren't as puffy as Carlos led me to believe. I also feel like they hyped us all up with the George pose last year. And we did not get that this year. We got nothing, just like a zoomed in video of his forehead, which was kind of annoying. But the graphics are cool. The graphics they've done in a cool way, but it doesn't really match with the video that we're getting. Okay, so the race itself, in my opinion, other than a handful of moments, the race was a bit boring. So I think I'm going to start with some highlights and then chat about some key takeaways. It's not going to be a play-by-play because there was nothing to talk about. The first only incident that happened, which is actually a first, the Bahrain GP has never had no DNFs, and it's almost always had a yellow flag or a race stoppage of some sort. It did have a yellow flag for 10 seconds, but The very first incident was between Nico and Lance, and Nico had made contact with Lance, which set them back all the way to the end of the grid. Nico needed a new front wing. Lance also was at the back of the grid, but he ended up recovering rather well and ended up finishing P10. Now, in terms of racing, the only exciting thing that happened was Carlos Sainz. I don't know what's going on during this race. Actually, I do know what's going on, but Carlos was going balls to the walls. He's literally the definition of like, what are you going to do? Fire me? They can't do anything to him. And so he was going full send. He was fighting George. He was fighting Charles. He overtook Charles twice with no team orders. Yes, Charles had car issues, but Carlos was still giving us very exciting overtakes. It was just really fun to watch. And it was the only interesting thing that happened the whole time. So the first overtake he did was like in lap 11, and it was like this really cool move that when Brundle was describing it, he was like, well, that was not synchronized swimming because they weren't given any team orders to do it. The second overtake happened because Carlos ended up pitting after everyone else and failed the undertake, basically ended up behind where he was originally. So he had to overtake Charles again. And again, he like went late on the brakes to just swing around Charles, and it was very cool. He also ended up overtaking George, and he did it with literally like no problem. Like he literally just swerved around him. Oh, these are so cute. He just like ended up swinging around him, and George like did not fight him at all. But again, they were having issues. I think I put way too much oil in here. Also, apparently the commentator said that George's car doused Carlos in oil, basically. I did not see it happen, but lol if it did. I don't know if I can make them higher. He wanted them higher, but like they're just spreading out. Oh well. It's gonna be regular oladiki, as they call them in Russian. All right, so the next thing I want to talk about is I did not know that we've all collectively decided to refer to Visa Cash App RB as V-Carb. Sounds like carbs eat on Valentine's Day, but I'll go with it. So there was the biggest like drama was between Yuki and Daniel and the whole team. So this was super weird. Basically, Yuki was P11ing the whole time, as Yuki does. But towards the end, he found himself in P14 trying to overtake Kevin Magnussen, and behind him was Daniel Ricciardo. Now, after the race, we found out that apparently the team had discussed that Daniel would go on softs towards the end of the race, which would automatically give him a pace advantage. And should him and Yuki find themselves next to each other, that would obviously mean that Yuki would have to give way to Daniel should Daniel be faster. However, in general, Yuki had much faster pace the entire race, as is evidenced by the fact that he was ahead of Daniel, and also evidenced by the fact that he qualified way ahead of Daniel. Not way ahead, but ahead. Towards the end of the race, Yuki was chasing down Kevin Magnussen and was pretty close. And then as he was like in the middle of attempting an overtake, he gets told on the radio to swap with Daniel. And he literally goes, "Are you kidding me now?" Which there was back and forth between Yuki and his engineer, and he was like not happy. And like, I don't blame him. He's literally in the middle of an overtake. Why would they ask him to do that? A lap or so later, Yuki lets Daniel through and says on the radio, "Yeah, thanks guys, appreciate it." Very sarcastically. Like he was really not happy. He was swearing up a storm. He was not happy with his team. And like, again, don't blame him. Okay, unfortunately, by the time this swap ended up happening, Max had closed in on both of them, and there were blue flags. They had to let him overtake, et cetera, which inevitably slowed everyone down, and the distance between the V-Carbs and Kevin grew a bit more. And it seems like none of them were happy how the driver swap went down. Yuki was obviously unhappy because he thought he was faster and didn't think it should have happened in the first place, and Daniel thought it should have happened way earlier when his soft tires were fresher and before Max had caught up to them. Then Yuki gets on a radio and says basically like, they're so slow, they need to go faster. And the response he got back was so Ferrari, and it was just like, "Oh, we're checking," or "Okay, got it," or just like something completely useless. And he was obviously pissed off because he was activated. I think Franz Tost learned how to manage him and learned how to deal with him in a way that was conducive to his style of driving and his personality. And now this new team has come in and they don't know what to do with him. And one of the things he did was during the cool down lap, he basically sped up to try to overtake Daniel. And like, it was like a really dangerous move for any time, but especially during a cool down lap. And Daniel went on the radio and was like, what the fuck? And then went, whatever, I'll save it. He's a fucking helmet. Doesn't really sound like saving it, but also what often ends up happening in these situations is they swap. And if the person who got to go ahead isn't able to complete the move, they give the spot back because Yuki was ahead and he like willingly gave up the spot for his teammate. That didn't happen in this case, which is why, yes, it's not for points, but still it's like annoying. He was ahead of Daniel and he let Daniel pass. Daniel did not overtake him. So why should Daniel be able to finish in that position when he was unable to overtake, you know? So the reasoning behind his behavior, I understand. The fact that he did it, obviously like I understand the urge to like throw something or like do something, but like this isn't a video game. You're in a literal car. Then another driver is in a car literally next to you. Afterwards, when Daniel was doing the post-race show with Will Buxton, he was saying that he wants to be polite, but like he'll call it what it is. And Yuki's behavior was immature. He basically just called it immaturity. And then later we'll talk about it maturely. And just kept using the word immature and mature. And it just, I don't know, whenever people talk about Yuki in that way, it annoys me because I don't think he's immature. I think he behaved stupidly. But like, whatever. Whatever the reason, Daniel ended up getting better strategy. But generally, Yuki was faster than Daniel all weekend, as I said. And so really the issue is down to the pit wall and the strategy and the new guy on the block, Laurent Mecchi, who seemed to like come from Ferrari and like bring the Ferrari energy with him. Like not just the strategy, but also the way he handled the whole situation was just not great and very like reminiscent of Ferrari. And I just think we can do better and both Daniel and Yuki deserve better. And I really don't want their relationship to suffer just because this new team of people doesn't know how to manage them properly. Anyway, too long didn't read. Love Yuki on the radio. I love it when he's angry. I think it's really funny. And in this situation, I believe it was totally warranted. I just think that the team needs to work on how they handle the drivers and not try to fuck up their relationship before it's even begun. Okay, so a couple things to note about the end of the race is that Max finished like 22 seconds ahead of everyone else. I saw a TikTok of someone in the stands showing the gap between Max and then Checo and Carlos, and it's like hilariously long. Like 22 seconds feels fast, but then when you are sitting there waiting for another car to come, it literally feels like a century. And then when Carlos, this is like debatable still, but like when Carlos was in park firm, there was a moment where he was looking around for what I assume is his team, and they were nowhere to be found. I did see some Ferrari mechanics walking around the actual car, but no one was there to greet him in the same way that the Red Bull team was there to greet Checo and Max. And I don't know if I just didn't see it and they were hiding somewhere. The camera just like went off before we could see them properly, but like it looked like he was there alone and he looked confused as he was looking around, and it was really sad. I also didn't see many of them at the podium ceremony. It looked like there was like 4 of them. I don't know if it was, again, the camera angle and like they just didn't televise it, but it looked like he'd been abandoned by the team. So I hope he continues to go full send because like, fuck them. He deserves to win and he needs a job next year. So the cool down room did not disappoint. Max once again was very committed to debriefing the whole thing. And then when Carlos came in, they were showing one of his overtakes and Max looks over at Carlos and he's like, not bad. And Carlos goes, like shrugs, like, yeah, of course. And then Max starts giggling at Carlos's shrug. And also I think it's really funny because every time they showed a new overtake, Max is like, oh yeah, saw that. Oh yeah, saw that. And the commentators were like, does he have like a TV in his car? Like how has he already seen half the race? So I think one of the most exciting things that happened is the fact that there were so many technical issues just across the board. I swear every other minute there was a report of another problem. None of them were crazy enough to put a stop to the race, but it's quite a hefty list of problems we encountered. So I'm just going to do a laundry list. So Mercedes, at one point Lewis's radio was "my seat is broken," and they just went copy. Both of the Mercedes had power unit problems. At one point Lewis's battery was down to 1%. It like recharges itself, but at the same, like he had to like manage that issue the whole time. And George was told he needs to manage his battery throughout the race, so the same thing didn't happen to him, I guess. Something was going on. Ferrari, Charles was managing some sort of brake problem the entire time where the temperature of his right and left brake were like over 100 degrees different, and it was causing him to sporadically lock up. It seemed after like 12 laps or so, he figured out what was kind of happening or how to anticipate it, and he was able to regulate it a bit more, but he was still managing this problem like the whole race. And it's also why he was driving so oddly. And it's also just basically a miracle that he even finished fourth. Also, not a technical issue, but the communication problem at Ferrari remains a major problem. Charles complains about the brake thing and they respond, "We are checking." And they did check, and then they came back with, "Oh yeah, there's a problem." Cool, thanks for the help. Speaking of communication issues, at Red Bull, the only problem they had was the radio. At one point, Checo starts shouting into his radio for his engineer to speak louder, mate, shout, shout, even though he sounded very quiet. And then we get a shot of the engineer frantically trying to change his radio so that Checo could hear him properly. It's kind of funny. That was literally their only problem. At Williams, they had a lot of issues with their steering today. So they had a new wheel put in place that basically integrates the screen into the wheel, which is what all the other drivers basically already have, but Williams was a little behind. But apparently, however they designed it or whoever engineered it, it just didn't work properly. So at one point, Alex was being told to change the settings on his wheel, and he was like, it doesn't want to. Then it was saying that it was overheating. It just had like a mind of its own. And then Logan, there was a moment when he went off track and the race was yellow flagged and we thought he was done. And there was a shot of James Vowell looking extremely confused, like furrowing his brow at the computer trying to figure out what the hell was going on. And then he was able to rejoin the race, and it turns out his wheel just switched settings on its own without him doing anything. So they had to swap his wheel. So it seems like the new steering wheel was a big mistake and they need to fix it. Hopefully they can fix it by next week. Official Williams account posted a TikTok making fun of it. It was like sad violin music to the steering wheel. And like us like 2 weeks ago, look at our new steering wheel. And then us now just like failing miserably. It was really funny. I'll link it in the show notes. At Kick Sauber, Valtteri Bottas had a 52-second pit stop due to a wheel nut issue, which made me lol, because if any of you remember back during the Valtteri Mercedes days, they got a wheel gun stuck in one of the wheel nuts and they couldn't get it out, and ended up being like unofficially the longest pit stop ever. This was very reminiscent of that. And then there were some like non-issue issues. Aston was fast enough to be towards the front, but not fast enough to fight the front, if that makes sense, which was obvious because Fernando was always there to be overtaken, but he continued to be there to be overtaken and still finished 9th. And it was kind of confusing because by the way they kept saying, Fernando's overtaken, Fernando's overtaken, you would think that he'd be like 20th, but he wasn't, he was 9th. And then Lance got screwed up by Nico, but he still ended up finishing 10th. So he got 1 point, which again, they're like good, but not good. Alpine is terrible. I don't know what the actual issue is. It wasn't like there was like a continuous problem, or at least not that I heard about, but they finished 17th and 8th. They qualified 19th and 20th. So I guess good job them. Everyone keeps saying that Otmar is like sitting at home giggling to himself. Probably is, to be fair, but like, I have a feeling they'll resolve their problem soon. It's also kind of embarrassing because they have so many celebrities backing them. All right, moving on to results. So the driver of the day was Carlos Sainz, and I voted for him. He's the only one who gave us any racing throughout the day. Brundle said it was kind of weird because when another driver has dominated the way he has the whole weekend, aka Max with the pole, fastest lap, win, etc., it seems like they should be winning, but Carlos like completely outperformed his car, and I agree with him. I just hope that it's the start of an era where he consistently shows up throughout the year and shows out on track. He needs a seat next year. He's got something to fight for. Dick in the box. I don't know if I feel like there was witchcraft afoot in the GP this week, but there was a bizarre slew of technical issues. And so my gut is to point to witchcraft. But also Ferrari, Carlos outperformed his car. Charles was driving at a horrifying piece of machinery. And they just kept checking and being like, yeah, there's a problem. The problem persisted. So, and if they actually didn't properly show out for Carlos's podium, that really annoys me. It makes me mad. But otherwise, that's just usual Ferrari behavior, and that's as dicky as it got. So the results are as follows. Max, Checo, Carlos, Charles, George, Lando, Lewis, Oscar, Fernando, Lance, Guan Yu, Kevin, Daniel, Yuki, Alex, Nico, Esteban, Pierre, Valtteri, and Logan. And no one DNF'd in the first time in Bahrain history. The standings don't really matter yet, but Red Bull is leading. All right, so that's it for the Bahrain GP. Next up is Jeddah. Also, I thought it was really funny. Sky always plays like a trailer for the next Grand Prix at the end of the race, and Oscar was like narrating it. And I guess it was extra funny because Oscar they gave him a script that was like all about the Oscars. And I guess that's why they gave it to Oscar. So Oscar. The script was wild and it was delivered in a just very deadpan, no emotion, no effort from Oscar. And then at the end, he was like, who will get the award? Hopefully it's Oscar. And that part was definitely improv. That was not in the script. Anyway, I'll see you next week in Saudi Arabia. Make sure you subscribe, share with any potential boxes, and you can always DM or email me your thoughts because I love to hear from you. And make sure to follow at BoxBoxF1 Pod to keep up in between races. See you soon. Box. Oh. Here are